David Carter was used to living a quiet, tired life. Every morning started the same way. The alarm rang before the sun came up, and he slowly got out of bed, careful not to wake the small figure sleeping in the next room. His daughter, Lily, was 6 years old and the center of his entire world. He moved through the tiny apartment quietly, making breakfast while checking his watch every few minutes. Toast, scrambled eggs, and a small lunch packed in a pink box with a cartoon rabbit on the lid. It wasn't fancy, but he always tried to make it special for her. "Dad!" Lily's sleepy voice came from the hallway. He turned and smiled immediately. "Morning, kiddo. You're up early today." She rubbed her eyes and walked over in her fluffy socks. "Did I miss the eggs?" "Not a chance," he said, placing a plate in front of her. They ate together at the small kitchen table. Lily talked about school, her teacher, and a drawing she planned to make that day. David listened carefully, nodding and smiling, even though his mind kept drifting toward work. Bills were tight. They always were. Raising a child alone was not easy, especially in a big city where everything seemed expensive. But he never let Lily see that worry. After breakfast, he walked her to school before heading to the tall glass office building where he worked. The building looked impressive from the outside, but inside it was just another busy workplace full of tired employees and endless meetings. David worked as an assistant manager for one of the company's departments. He wasn't the most powerful person in the building, but he was known as someone reliable. If something needed to be done, people trusted David to handle it. Most of the employees had only seen the company's CEO a few times. She was known for being extremely private and very serious about work. Her name was Victoria Hale. People in the office often whispered about her. Some said she had built the company into something powerful in just a few years. Others said she barely slept and spent more time in the office than anyone else. David didn't think much about those rumors. His job was simply to do his work well and go home to his daughter. That day started like any other. Emails, reports, and meetings filled the morning. By the afternoon, his head was already aching from staring at spreadsheets. He stretched his shoulders and looked at the clock. Only another hour before he could leave and pick Lily up from her after-school program. Just as he began closing his laptop, someone from the executive floor walked into the department. "David Carter?" the woman asked. "That's me," he said, standing. "The CEO would like to see you in her office." For a moment, the entire room went quiet. Several co-workers looked up from their desks. David blinked. "The CEO?" "Yes. Now, please." His co-workers exchanged curious looks as he grabbed his jacket. People didn't usually get called to the top floor unless something serious had happened. As he walked toward the elevator, he tried to think of anything he might have done wrong. A missed report? A mistake in a budget file? Nothing came to mind. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, the atmosphere was completely different from the rest of the building. The hallway was quiet, the carpet thick, the lights soft. A receptionist greeted him politely and gestured toward a large office door. "She's expecting you," she said. David knocked lightly. "Come in," a calm voice answered. He stepped inside and immediately noticed how large the office was. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the entire city below. Everything in the room looked perfectly organized. Behind the desk sat Victoria Hale. She looked exactly like the rumors described, sharp, confident, and completely focused. Her posture was straight, and her expression was difficult to read. "Mr. Carter," she said. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, standing awkwardly near the door. "Please sit." He sat in the chair across from her desk, trying not to look nervous. Victoria studied a file in front of her before finally looking up. "You've been with the company for 5 years, she said. "That's correct. Your performance reports are consistently strong. Managers say you handle problems calmly and people trust you." David wasn't sure how to respond, so he simply nodded. "You also leave work exactly on time most days," she added. He felt slightly embarrassed. "I pick up my daughter from school." "Yes," she said quietly. "I know." That surprised him. She closed the file and leaned back slightly. "Mr. Carter, I need someone trustworthy. Someone who understands responsibility." "For a project?" he asked carefully. "Something like that." There was a short pause. Then she said something that made him question if he had heard correctly. I need you to pretend to be my husband for 1 year. David stared at her. For a moment, he thought it was some kind of strange joke, but Victoria Hale did not look like someone who joked. I'm sorry, he said slowly. I think I misunderstood. No, she said calmly. You understood perfectly. His brain struggled to process the sentence. Pretend to be your husband? Yes. He blinked again. For 1 year. The room felt suddenly smaller. Why me? He asked. Victoria stood and walked toward the window, looking out at the city. My family owns a large share of this company, she explained. They believe leadership should be stable and traditional. David wasn't sure where this was going. They have been pressuring me to marry, she continued. If I refuse much longer, they will attempt to replace me as CEO. That finally started to make sense. So you need people to think you're married, he said. Exactly. And you picked me because you have no connection to my family, no history with the company leadership, and a reputation for honesty. David rubbed the back of his neck. This is very unexpected, he admitted. Of course, she replied. Would this be like public appearances? Events? Yes. Family gatherings, business functions, and certain legal paperwork. Legal paperwork? Nothing that would harm you, she said quickly. There would be a formal agreement protecting both of us. David leaned back in the chair. He thought about Lily. He thought about rent, school supplies, and the future he wanted to give her. Still, this was a strange situation. And after 1 year, the arrangement ends, Victoria said, quietly. Like a divorce? Essentially. David let out a slow breath. What about my job? You would continue working here, she said, though some responsibilities might change. And compensation? She returned to the desk and slid a paper toward him. When he saw the number written there, his eyes widened. It was more money than he had ever seen offered for a single year of work. Enough to pay Lily's education for many years. Enough to finally stop worrying about bills. He looked up slowly. You're serious. Completely. Silence filled the office. David tried to imagine explaining this to anyone. There's just one thing I'm confused about, he said after a moment. Victoria raised an eyebrow slightly. Yes. He hesitated, then asked a question that popped into his mind first. If we're pretending to be married, he gestured awkwardly. Does that mean we're sharing a bed? For the first time since he entered the office, Victoria looked genuinely surprised. She studied him for a second. Then she slowly folded her hands. Mr. Carter, she said calmly. Those details can be discussed later. David nodded, though his face had turned slightly red. Right, of course. Victoria stood again. You don't have to decide immediately, she said. Take the evening to think about it. She handed him a folder containing the contract outline. If you agree, we begin next week. David held the folder carefully as he stood. His life had been predictable for years. Work, home, his daughter. Nothing dramatic ever happened. Until now, as he walked out of the office and back toward the elevator, his mind was racing. A fake marriage. For an entire year. When he stepped outside the building later that evening, the sky had already turned orange with sunset. He looked down at the folder again. Then he thought about Lily waiting for him. Life had just offered him the strangest decision he had ever faced. And somehow it might change everything. David barely slept that night. The folder Victoria had given him stayed on the small kitchen table while he washed dishes and helped Lily with her homework. Every few minutes he glanced at it, like it might suddenly disappear. Lily noticed it too. Is that work stuff? She asked while coloring a picture of a house with a big yellow sun above it. Something like that. David said carefully, Are you in trouble? He smiled and shook his head. No, not at all. But the truth was he didn't know what to think. The offer felt unreal. Pretend to be married to the CEO of the company? Live in her house? Attend events like a real couple? He sat at the table later that night and slowly read through the papers in the folder. The agreement was detailed but clear. The arrangement would last 1 year. During that time, they would appear publicly as husband and wife. There would be rules to protect both of them. At the end of the year, the agreement would quietly end. The compensation written in the contract still made him stare. It was enough to change his daughter's future. Enough to move them out of the small apartment. Enough to save for school. Enough to stop counting every dollar. David rubbed his forehead and leaned back in his chair. "This is crazy," he muttered. From the couch, Lily looked up. "What is—" "Nothing," he said quickly. He couldn't tell her about it yet. He wasn't even sure himself. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, he walked onto the small apartment balcony. The city lights stretched across the dark streets below. His life had been simple for years. Work, home, his daughter. Now someone had placed a completely different path in front of him. The next morning he woke up feeling just as uncertain. But one thing kept returning to his mind: Lily's future. After dropping her at school, he headed back to the office earlier than usual. The folder sat in his bag the entire time, like it weighed 10 pounds. When he reached the building lobby, he stood still for a moment. "Okay," he whispered to himself. "Just talk to her." A few minutes later, he was back on the quiet executive floor. The receptionist recognized him and gave a polite nod. "She's expecting you again." David knocked on the office door. "Come in," Victoria's voice answered. She was already sitting behind her desk, reading something on a tablet. When she looked up, her expression stayed calm as always. "Mr. Carter," she said. "Good morning," he replied, sitting down again. "Did you review the agreement?" "I did." "And—" David took a breath. "Before I answer, I have a few questions." "Of course." He placed a folder on the desk. "First," he said, "my daughter." Victoria listened quietly. "She lives with me full time," he explained. "She's my priority. If this arrangement affects her in a bad way, I can't do it." Victoria nodded once. "I expected that concern." "She would live with us?" he asked. "If you agree to move into my home, yes," Victoria said. "I would not ask you to leave your child behind." That answer surprised him. "You'd be okay with that?" "I have a large house," she replied simply. "Space is not a problem." David shifted in his chair. "There's also the personal side of this," he said awkwardly. "Meaning, people believing we're actually married," he said. "That could get complicated." "The contract covers those boundaries," she said calmly. "No romantic expectations," he said. "Correct. Separate private lives," he added. "Within reason," she replied. David nodded slowly. "And the living situation?" Victoria folded her hands on the desk. "There are several bedrooms in my home," she said. "You would have your own." David felt slightly relieved. "Good," he said. Victoria tilted her head slightly. "You were concerned about that." "A little," he admitted. For a brief second, something that almost looked like amusement passed across her face, but it disappeared quickly. "Any other concerns?" she asked. "Just one," he said. "Honesty." She raised an eyebrow. "If we're doing this," David continued, "I don't want to be used as a shield while people attack me behind the scenes." Victoria looked at him carefully. "My family may question the marriage," she said, "but legally they cannot remove me as CEO if I appear stable and married." "Appear?" he repeated. "Yes." David leaned back again. "This still sounds like something from a movie," he said. "Life is often stranger than movies," Victoria replied. Silence sat between them for a moment. Finally he spoke again. "If I say yes, when would this start?" "Soon," she answered. "My family is hosting a gathering in 10 days. And they expect to meet your husband," he said. "Exactly." David exhaled slowly. "That doesn't give us much time to prepare. Which is why I need an answer today," she said. He looked down at the contract again. Images filled his mind. Lily having her own room, not worrying about rent every month, being able to plan a future instead of just surviving each week. He looked back up at Victoria. "1 year," he said. "1 year," she confirmed. "After that we go back to normal lives." "Yes." David rubbed his chin and then gave a small nod. "All right," he said quietly. Victoria waited. "I'll do it," he finished. For the first time since they met, Victoria looked genuinely relieved. She reached for a pen and slid the final agreement across the desk. "Then we should make official," she said. David signed the paper slowly. When he finished, Victoria signed it as well. Just like that, the arrangement began. There are a few immediate steps, she said, such as, you and your daughter will move into my home this weekend. David blinked. This weekend? Yes. That's fast. We don't have much time, she said. And work. You will remain in your position, Victoria explained. But for public appearances, you will be introduced as my husband. David rubbed the back of his neck again. That's going to shock people. Most of the company will hear about it tomorrow, she said calmly. Tomorrow, I will announce that I recently married privately. David laughed softly in disbelief. My co-workers are going to lose their minds. Victoria stood up and walked toward the window again. Mr. Carter, she said, looking out over the city. For this to work, we must appear comfortable together in public. That might take practice, he admitted, which is why we will start preparing immediately, she said. He stood as well. I guess I should start packing, he said. Victoria turned back toward him. One more thing, she added. Yes. Your daughter. David waited. I would like to meet her before you move in, she said. You want to meet Lily? If we are going to appear as a family, it would be wise, Victoria replied. David thought about that. She's very talkative, he warned. I can manage, Victoria said. Most adults say that, he replied with a small smile. Victoria did not respond, but there was a slight curiosity in her eyes. Bring her for dinner tomorrow evening, she said. At your house? Yes. David nodded slowly. All right. As he left the office again, his heart was beating faster than before. Yesterday, he had been an ordinary employee living an ordinary life. Now, he had agreed to pretend to be married to the most powerful woman in the company. And tomorrow, his 6-year-old daughter was going to meet his fake wife. The next evening, David arrived at Victoria's house with Lily in tow. The building was much bigger than his old apartment, with large windows reflecting the city lights and a quiet, impressive entrance. Lily's eyes went wide as she held his hand tightly. Wow, she whispered. It's huge. David smiled, feeling a little nervous himself. It is, isn't it? A door opened before they could knock. Victoria stood there, dressed simply yet elegant. Her hair was pulled back, and her expression was neutral, but her eyes softened slightly when they met Lily's. Hello, Lily, Victoria said calmly. Lily tilted her head and gave a small, shy wave. Hi. David nodded. This is her room. Victoria stepped aside, allowing them inside. Lily's eyes immediately darted around the space. There were toys neatly arranged on shelves, books stacked carefully, and a small table with chairs just her size. You can put your things here, Victoria said, gesturing to the room. Make it your own while you're here. Lily's face lit up. Really? Of course, Victoria replied. David felt a mix of relief and surprise. Victoria had thought ahead. She wasn't just inviting them into a house. She was preparing for them. After settling in, they all moved to the dining room. The table was set for 3, simple but inviting. Victoria motioned for them to sit, and she poured juice into Lily's cup. The conversation started stiffly. Lily asked questions about the house, the big windows, and the city view. Victoria answered politely, with the careful patience of someone not used to children, but willing to try. David noticed Lily starting to relax. She began telling a story about her day at school, laughing when she mentioned a funny thing a classmate did. Victoria listened quietly, occasionally asking gentle questions. David was surprised by the attention she gave and how her tone softened when she spoke to Lily. I didn't know you liked drawing, Victoria said, noticing the artwork Lily had brought. I love it, Lily said, smiling. Look, I made a rainbow. Victoria leaned closer to see the drawing. That's beautiful. You're very talented. Lily beamed and held it up proudly. David felt a small warmth in his chest, realizing Victoria's praise was genuine. The dinner continued with polite conversation, but slowly, the stiffness began to fade. Victoria even asked Lily about her favorite books and games, showing curiosity that felt real. David noticed how she smiled faintly when Lily laughed, a rare glimpse of warmth. After dinner, David told Lily it was time for bed. Victoria walked him to the room, offering a small nightlight and some soft blankets. Lily hugged David tightly before climbing into bed. "Good night, princess," David whispered. "Good night, Daddy," she said sleepily. As Lily drifted off, David turned to Victoria. "Thank you for being patient with her," he said softly. Victoria shrugged slightly. "She's easy to like." David felt his chest tighten at the small compliment. "I wasn't expecting this to go so smoothly." "People often surprise you," Victoria replied, her eyes softening. Over the next few days, the adjustment to living in Victoria's house began. David and Lily settled into the large home, learning the routines and rules that Victoria maintained. The house was organized and quiet, almost too perfect, but it had its own charm. They explored the different rooms, finding small things that made it feel livable. Lily quickly adapted. She ran to her new room, leaving small toys scattered around, and Victoria didn't complain. David watched quietly, noting how carefully Victoria observed Lily without interrupting, giving her space while still maintaining a calm order. When it came time to practice the public appearances, Victoria taught David how to walk beside her, how to stand, and how to smile naturally in front of cameras or other people. At first, it felt awkward, almost forced, but gradually, they found a rhythm. Evenings became the hardest. They shared meals in the dining room, and sometimes David noticed moments when Victoria seemed less guarded. She would talk about her past, her ambitions, and occasionally her loneliness. It was subtle, often hidden behind careful words. But David saw it. One night, after Lily had fallen asleep, David and Victoria were in the living room discussing upcoming corporate events. "Do you ever get tired of it all?" David asked. Victoria looked up, surprised. "Of what?" "The company, the control, the public image. Doesn't it ever get exhausting?" She paused, thoughtful. "Sometimes, but it's necessary." "Necessary for what? Happiness? Or just survival?" Victoria didn't answer immediately. She looked at the floor, then back at David. "I suppose survival. Happiness is complicated." David nodded slowly. He didn't press further. He had learned that Victoria didn't share easily, and pushing her too hard could break the fragile understanding they were building. The days turned into weeks. David noticed small changes in Victoria. She started joining them during breakfast, helping Lily with small tasks, and even laughing at Lily's jokes. Her presence in the house slowly became less intimidating and more human. She wasn't just a powerful CEO anymore. She was someone learning to connect with a child and a single father. One afternoon, while working on a presentation together, Victoria paused and looked at him. "You're patient," she said. "With Lily, with me, with all this." David felt a warmth in his chest. "I have to be. She's my world." Victoria nodded. "I can see that." Their conversations began to drift from just the work at hand. They talked about hobbies, favorite books, and little life stories. David learned that beneath Victoria's composed exterior, there was a depth of experience and loneliness he hadn't expected. And Victoria started noticing David's dedication and quiet strength, the way he managed everything without complaint, always putting Lily first. It wasn't immediate, and it wasn't dramatic. It was small moments. The way Victoria adjusted Lily's blanket at night. The way David laughed at one of her rare jokes. The way Lily would ask for Victoria when she was at work. Slowly, a rhythm formed in the house, a balance between the formal and the personal. One weekend, David took Lily to the nearby park, while Victoria attended an official meeting. Watching his daughter run and play, he realized how much this experience had already changed their lives. The house, the security, the new routines. It wasn't just about the agreement anymore. It was becoming real in small, everyday ways. When they returned, Victoria had prepared dinner. They ate together, the conversation flowing naturally. Lily talked about her day at school, and Victoria asked questions with genuine interest. David realized how much Victoria had begun to open up, learning patience and warmth in ways her office world never demanded. Later that night, David tucked Lily into bed and looked around the room, reflecting on the changes. The house didn't feel intimidating anymore. It felt like a home, even with Victoria living there. And Victoria, she was starting to feel like part of that home, even if the marriage was still just for appearances. David understood something important. Life had thrown them both into an unexpected situation. It had started as a business arrangement, a contract, but the days, the small moments, the laughter and conversations, they were building something real, something stronger than any contract could define. As he turned off the light and watched Lily sleep, David realized that no matter what the world thought, no matter what challenges came next, they were already forming a family. And for the first time in a long while, he felt hope that went beyond financial stability. This hope was about connection, about trust, about finding warmth in the most unexpected places. Weeks passed, and life in Victoria's house continued with its new rhythm. Mornings were filled with the gentle chaos of breakfast and getting Lily ready for school. Afternoons were spent with David working and Victoria managing her responsibilities, and evenings became their quiet family time. But the calm wasn't going to last forever. It started with a message from Victoria's family. They were planning an important event and insisted on seeing the new husband in action. David knew it was going to be challenging, but what worried him more was the scrutiny Victoria would face. Every word, every glance, every action would be analyzed. The night before the event, David sat on the couch, staring at the invitation and the instructions about appearances. He could feel the tension building in his chest. "David." Victoria's voice came softly from the doorway. She had changed into a casual sweater and pants, looking less formal than usual, but still radiating her usual presence. He looked up. "Yeah." "Are you nervous?" she asked. He shook his head quickly, but she noticed the tight line of his jaw. "A little," he admitted finally. Victoria walked over and sat beside him. "I won't lie. They're strict, and they notice everything. But we'll handle it. Together." Her words were calm, but they carried a weight of honesty. David realized just how much he relied on her even in this arrangement. The next day, the event arrived, and the house buzzed with activity. Victoria and David got ready, rehearsing greetings, handshakes, and the careful smiles they would present. When they entered the grand hall, it was immediately clear that the family was not easily impressed. Eyes swept over them, searching for imperfections, questioning the sudden marriage. David felt the familiar tension rise, but kept his composure. Victoria stayed by his side, confident, but he could sense her own nerves beneath the surface. They moved through the room together, greeting family members with the practiced politeness that the situation demanded. Then came a question that made David's stomach twist. A distant relative asked casually, "So, how did you meet?" The simplicity of the question hid the potential for scrutiny. David exchanged a glance with Victoria. She smiled slightly and answered, "We met through work, and things developed naturally over time." The cousin nodded, but David could feel the unspoken judgment in the eyes that followed. They were being tested not for love, but for the appearance of love. After the event, the tension didn't dissipate. Gossip spread quietly, and David noticed subtle changes in Victoria's demeanor. She became quieter, more guarded, and sometimes distant. He understood why. Her family's expectations and scrutiny were not easy to ignore, and the pressure weighed heavily on both of them. At home, the conversations turned serious. Victoria expressed her frustration with the constant judgment, and David listened. He couldn't offer solutions for her family, but he could offer support. "I don't know how much longer I can handle their pressure," Victoria admitted one evening. "Every move I make is questioned, every smile, every word analyzed. I feel like I'm constantly on trial." David reached for her hand. "You're strong. They can't see what's inside. But here with us, it doesn't matter. You can be yourself." Victoria looked at him, her eyes showing a rare vulnerability. For a moment, she let her guard down, and David saw the person behind the powerful CEO image. As the week continued, another challenge appeared. One of Victoria's colleagues, who didn't know about the arrangement, noticed David's presence in meetings and made a subtle comment that could have raised suspicions. David had to navigate carefully, balancing professionalism with the fake personal life that now intertwined with their work. The tension wasn't just external. Living together as a pretend family also brought moments of awkwardness and personal reflection. They had to share space, share responsibilities, and occasionally face small disagreements about routines or habits. While it wasn't romantic, the closeness created opportunities for real emotions to surface, sometimes causing confusion or discomfort. One night, after Lily had gone to bed, David and Victoria found themselves in the kitchen, preparing a simple snack. Silence lingered between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts. "Do you ever wonder if this is too much?" David asked finally. Victoria paused, chopping vegetables slowly. "Every day. But we have to keep going. It's not just about us anymore." He nodded. "I know, but it's hard not to feel responsible for everything. For Lily, for you, for all of this." Victoria stopped and looked at him. "You're doing more than you realize. You've kept this house together, kept her safe, and kept me grounded." David felt a strange warmth at her words, a mixture of gratitude and connection. It was different from anything he had experienced, and he realized just how much their lives had become entwined, even if it was under the guise of a contract. The days that followed were filled with small crises. Lily got sick and needed extra care. A sudden work emergency required Victoria's attention. Both situations forced David and Victoria to coordinate closely, making quick decisions and supporting each other. The pretense of marriage began to feel necessary, almost natural, because they had to rely on each other so completely. One evening, as they were putting Lily to bed, the child looked between them and said something that made David pause. "Daddy, will you and Mrs. Victoria always be together?" David felt a pang of uncertainty. He knew how to explain it simply without lying. But even as he crafted his words, he realized the complexity of the situation. "For now, we're together to help each other, Lily," he said gently. "But we're all learning and taking care of each other. That's what matters." Lily smiled and snuggled into her blankets, seemingly satisfied with the answer. But David and Victoria exchanged a glance that spoke volumes. They were both aware that appearances were merging with reality in ways neither expected. Tension continued to grow when Victoria's family hinted at more events and social obligations. Each situation required careful planning, rehearsals, and a delicate balance of public appearances versus private life. David had to constantly navigate between being a devoted father, a supportive partner, and a professional employee, all under the watchful eyes of a critical family and staff. As the pressure mounted, Victoria and David began to develop a subtle understanding of each other. They could read the smallest gestures, anticipate reactions, and provide silent support when words weren't enough. It was exhausting, but also deepened their connection in ways they hadn't anticipated. The breaking point came when a particularly tense family dinner challenged both of them. A cousin, unaware of the arrangement, made a pointed remark about the sudden marriage, implying doubts about its authenticity. David had to respond with grace, maintaining the appearance of a composed husband, while Victoria handled the subtle accusations with poise. After the dinner, they returned home in silence. The weight of the day pressed heavily on them. Victoria sat in the living room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. David poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to her. "I don't know how much longer I can keep up this act," Victoria admitted softly. David sat beside her. "We've made it this far. One day at a time. We'll handle the rest together." Victoria looked at him, her eyes revealing a mixture of exhaustion and appreciation. "You make it seem possible." David smiled faintly. "Because I know we have to. For Lily, for both of us, for everything." As they sat together in the quiet house, David realized that the pretense of marriage had already changed them. It had forced them into situations where trust, patience, and understanding were necessary. And in that process, they had begun to care for each other in ways that weren't part of the original plan. The challenges were far from over, but for the first time, David felt a sense of partnership with Victoria that went beyond obligation. They were navigating a difficult path, but they were doing it together, and that made all the difference. The line between appearance and reality had blurred, and while it brought complications, it also brought a newfound closeness that neither had anticipated. The final weeks of the arrangement arrived with a mixture of relief and tension. David and Victoria had survived the scrutiny, the rehearsals, and the delicate balance of appearances versus private life. Lily had adapted completely, treating Victoria as part of the family, and even the smallest smiles or shared jokes felt natural. But the end of the contract also brought uncertainty. David found himself thinking more often about what would happen afterward. Would life return to normal? Would Victoria continue to be a part of their lives? Or would she retreat into her own world? The thought made him uneasy. They had been sharing routines, meals, laughter, and small family moments for months, and the idea of separation felt strange. One afternoon, as David returned home from work, he noticed Victoria in the kitchen, preparing a simple dinner. She looked up and smiled, though a hint of concern lingered in her eyes. "How was your day?" he asked, setting down his bag. "Busy as usual," she replied. "But I've been thinking about the future, about what comes next." David felt his chest tighten. "Me too." They sat down together, Lily playing quietly at the table with her drawing supplies. The conversation was gentle at first, talking about plans for the weekend and small household chores. But inevitably, they drifted toward the unspoken topic. "This arrangement, it's almost over," Victoria said carefully. David nodded, watching Lily coloring. "Yes." There was a pause. Silence hung between them, filled with the weight of months of shared experiences. David felt a mixture of fear and hope. Fear of losing the newfound family structure, and hope that the bond they had built might survive beyond the contract. "I didn't expect any of this," Victoria admitted. "When I first asked you, it was just a way to manage appearances. But over time, it became real in ways I didn't plan." David looked at her, recognizing the honesty and vulnerability in her tone. "I know. I never thought I'd feel this way either. But we've shared so much. I can't imagine just going back to the way things were." Victoria nodded slowly. "Neither can I." Later that evening, as they helped Lily get ready for bed, David noticed how naturally Victoria interacted with his daughter. The two of them shared a small laugh over a bedtime story, and for a moment, it was impossible to remember that their family was only supposed to be an act. Once Lily was asleep, David and Victoria sat in the living room. The quiet hummed the city outside their windows. "Do you think," David began, hesitating, "do you think we can continue without the contract?" Victoria studied him, her expression unreadable for a moment. "I've thought about it. I don't want this to end. Not the way it started, and not with us pretending. But it's complicated. My family, the company." David reached for her hand. "We can figure it out. Slowly. One step at a time. We've already learned to trust each other, to rely on each other. That doesn't have to end." A small, relieved smile appeared on her face. "I'd like that," she said softly. The next day, they approached the end of the formal agreement with careful planning. Victoria's family expected a final demonstration of the arrangement at a corporate event. Both of them knew this would be their last official act together under the guise of the contract. They practiced handshakes, smiles, and formal conversation. But beneath it all, there was a new sense of ease, a familiarity that had developed over months. At the event, they presented themselves confidently. Victoria's family noticed a difference. The subtle comfort between them, the way they seemed to anticipate each other's needs, and the quiet strength of their teamwork. Questions about the marriage were met with polite answers. But this time, the performance didn't feel like an act. It was real in every interaction. After the event, as they returned home, Victoria turned to David. "That went, well, better than I expected." He smiled. "Yes." It felt natural. Over the following days, they began to slowly remove the formal boundaries of the contract. They shared meals without rehearsing conversation, managed household chores together without careful planning, and allowed themselves to laugh at small mistakes. The pretense faded, replaced by the natural rhythm of a real family. David watched Lily playing in the living room and realized how much this arrangement had transformed their lives. She was happier, more secure, and thriving in ways he hadn't thought possible. And Victoria, who had once been distant and guarded, now laughed freely, shared her thoughts openly, and embraced the warmth of family life. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony overlooking the city, David spoke first. "I'm glad we didn't let this end with just a contract. I think we're a real family now." Victoria reached for his hand, holding it gently. "I think so too. I didn't expect to feel this way, but I can't deny it. We've built something that matters. Something real." David nodded, feeling a wave of relief and happiness. "We'll take it one day at a time. No pressure, no pretending. Just us." Victoria leaned against him slightly, a gesture that had become natural over time. I like that idea. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a new normal. The formal contract was no longer needed, but the bond they had formed remained. David continued to work, but the house was filled with warmth, laughter, and the small chaos of everyday life. Lily thrived, enjoying the presence of two adults who cared deeply for her. They learned to balance their responsibilities with their connection. Victoria continued to lead her company, but the home became a sanctuary where she could be herself without judgment. David provided stability and love, and together, they navigated the challenges of life as a family. The arrangement that had started as a contract had grown into something far more meaningful. Trust, patience, understanding, and care had replaced the formal rules. And through it all, they discovered that the most important relationships weren't built on appearances, contracts, or expectations. They were built on shared experiences, support, and genuine connection. One quiet evening, as they watched Lily asleep, Victoria whispered, "Thank you for staying, for everything." David smiled softly. "Thank you for trusting me, and for letting us be a family." For the first time in a long while, all three of them felt a sense of peace. The past challenges, the scrutiny, the awkwardness of pretending, it had all led them to this moment. They weren't just a family on paper anymore. They were real, and they would face whatever came next together.